Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuity Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special roundtable episode on leading with agility, mastering dynamic leadership in a changing world. Joined by three esteemed experts from the HR coaching, leadership, and recruitment world. And together we're going to dive into what it means to lead with agility in today's fast-paced environment. So expect to hear some insightful stories, practical experiences, and interactive discussions that will equip you with the tools to become a more adaptive and dynamic leader. Here we go. I'd like us to just quickly go around the room and introduce who we are, where we're zooming in from, and what does leading with agility mean to us today?
I'll go first. Diana Stabler. I am a HR director at an IT consulting company in Illinois. We're shortly just a little bit of distance from St. Louis. I've been in there for about 3.5 years. Great place to be, and I'm excited to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, next. Hi, I'm Kobe Mill. I'm in the beautiful Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, and I work for a company called Roman 3. We are a people and culture consulting company that does consulting, training, diagnostics, anything people and culture, that's our jam.
Awesome.
I'm Jen Warrington. I am just outside Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I own the Warrington Group, which is a recruitment and career strategy firm, and doing all things hiring all the time.
That's fantastic. And I'm so happy to be your host today, Ange MacCabe, CEO and founder of Intuity Performance, where we help elevate humans from within, focusing on whole person performance. So diving right into the topic, everyone, and we're all here because you're dynamos, you know your stuff, and are eager to share with the world. So what does leading with agility mean to you? And why do you think it's crucial in today's business landscape?
I'll jump in. Okay, I'll go first this time. That's fine.
Let's not be
okay. Let's not.
Come on, drop that.
I'll jump in. So for me, it's really being able to know and identify quickly when to pivot. And obviously, when we're working with organizations that have recruitment needs, they're usually very reactive versus being proactive. And oftentimes, as we're halfway through the process, something is changing, whether it's a candidate profile or whether it's structural changes inside the organization that we weren't anticipating. So for me, it's being able to stay calm when we need to pivot and not panic, and just know that being solutions focused is going to get us the ultimate result for the right candidate to sit in the right role, always protecting the employer brand and the candidate experience.
What I'm hearing in a nutshell, Jen, is that from your seat, it's really being able to lean into the clients. And in some circumstances, their needs shift, or candidate profiles, expectations may shift. And that nutshell is what you're pointing to in the sense as a leader yourself, being able to lean into the clients and kind of adapt essentially with some agility there.
Absolutely. And then being able to take it back to the team of recruiters that I have to say, okay, like I know we were going down this path and now we're going over this way. It's not as bad as it feels like, because at the end of the day, everything we do is to protect the candidate experience while enhancing the employer brand. So if we need to pivot and have a moment of panic inside, that's okay. Everything is always changing. So really knowing like you have to be able to embrace the pivot. And so doing it with the client, but then also taking it back to the team and saying like, catch your breath, because here we go off the deep end, and they're off the high dive, and we're going to figure that out. And then knowing that it's going to be okay, because and when it comes to people, they are the wild card in everything we do, no matter what side of the table they're on. And at the end of the day, we all know that on the under the HR umbrella, a lot of it is reactive. It's really hard to get people to do these things proactively, which would probably make it a little easier to be agile in this environment.
I hear you. Di, what are your thoughts when it comes to leading with agility from the coaching realm perspective?
Yeah, so I think it's really at the core of it is honoring an individual for who they are and not trying to turn them into something we want them to be. When we're hiring and bringing people in, the idea is to have that diversity of thought and experience and background. And, from a coaching perspective, even in HR, from my seat, there's coaching every day, whether it's my teammate or an employee that comes in and they just need a little bit of guidance on something. I think at the core of it's just honoring everybody's individuality and hoping that they align, of course, that our recruiters did a great job, and they do, and we're to the company values. So
Yeah, absolutely. Kobe, jump in.
So yeah, I think that what Jen said, as far as solution focus, I think is probably a cornerstone of agility of agile leadership, because a lot of it is there's so much of the desire to just react a lot of time in a lot of more traditional leadership, or go back to the well of where things used to work before. One of the things that we always like to do when we're trying to kind of help with a bit of a mind shift is try and provide some clarity around where some of the gaps in thinking are. And one of them that I think really well defines agile leadership is the difference between complicated and complex. Because complicated is when things are multifaceted, multi-leveled, but there's a conventional path forward. You can rinse and repeat. Your taxes are complicated. They're hard to do, but everyone can follow the same path to get there. Where complex is multifaceted, but every situation is unique. It's always different. What worked yesterday won't work today. What worked for you won't work for me. And the pinnacle of complex is people. Anything involving people, you are into complexity. So you have to be able to adjust to it, because what worked yesterday won't work before, but what works in one context, you can't just cut and paste into another. So I think part of the agile leader is aware of that, and is aware of, okay, we have to carve a new path every time. We can learn from the past, but we can't expect to just rinse and repeat.
I coached with one leader in the tech space out of the US, and it was really interesting because when they first started coaching with me, they were very much into mergers and acquisitions. And in the first instance of acquiring a business, they would actually, what they would call parking lot the business, meaning that the culture, the people, the programs would almost go on pause for 6 to 8 months prior to actually being integrated into the parent company. And my mind was blown by that situation, because I was like, oh gosh, like what's going on with people? And so as we continue to chat from a coaching perspective, that leader had the agility epiphany, I guess we'll say, in the sense that when they're looking to build their parent company to this thing, to this empire, you can't just park things. You have to be agile and be able to maneuver things in a fluid perspective. And that means people as well. So for me, what leading with agility means to me is, piggybacking off of a lot of what we're just talking about. It's looking at it from an individual leadership perspective of dynamics and what's changing and what do I need to adapt to make sure that there's a solution and or favorable outcome, as well as being able to meet my team members where they're at and influencing that set agility, in the sense that I don't need to care and control you or micromanage you. Rather, I need to mentor you in the agility mindset so that it aligns with department culture, et cetera, et cetera. And to Kobe's perspective, it's really dividing complexity from challenges. And oftentimes when we start to think about agile, we start to think about processes, not so much people. So I would add to that when we're thinking about agility, people aren't one size fits all. It's like looking at different thumbprints, and being able to meet them where they're at is super important, especially when it comes to leading in today's business landscape. Because no longer is it technology that's the strongest asset, it's people. And a lot of companies are coming to this realm, but I think that there's an opportunity to shed more of a lens on that as well. What are your thoughts?
So
I think, sorry, Cody, go ahead. Excited.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of quickly say, yeah, I mean, we've been involved with like a lot of organizational change, like municipal amalgamations, mergers, acquisitions, that sort of stuff like that too. And you're right, as far as, it's like companies, organizations do a great job getting the buildings ready, getting the assets ready, whereas the people will figure it out as they go. And this idea of having a bit of a intentional shift of, no, we need to we need to realize that it's the people that run our businesses. It's the people that operate the machinery. It's the people that, that make the sales and everything.
Mm.
So it's the idea of, even kind of the focus of, even just getting an idea around agile leadership is a high goal, but its fundamental understanding of the human side of business is the idea of,
Nice tag.
thank you. Are our machines there to improve the productivity of our people, or are people there to improve the productivity of our machines?
Mm.
Part of it is too, we're just kind of defining what is the preconceived notions, the default thinking that we're operating under. Because if we're thinking people are there to get the most out of the machines, then trying to, adjust to the people-centric approach is going to be a huge endeavor, because you really have to kind of get the fundamentals right before we can actually start to optimize.
I think you're going to say something too.
Yeah, it's kind of just piggybacking off of Kobe there. People are what makes us niche, right? They're our niche. And we forget that sometimes. Oh, we've got this fantastic equipment. We've got this AI and it's going to do everything. But before we know it, everybody's going to be using AI. So what makes us different? And it's always the people, right? And I think if you keep that at the center, all of these challenges coming in from the expansion of technology and industries changing, I think that's really what's going to make people stand out, is coming back to the basics, which is the people. So exciting, actually, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've read recently from PwC that 85% of CEOs reported that agile practices, meaning agile leadership, not so much operational agile, really improve their organization's ability to respond to market challenges and changes. And we know what changes have been going on, both from an economic perspective, a social economic perspective, and a business landscape perspective. So I'd like us to discuss, like, within our own businesses or understanding from peers, what have you. Tell me some stories about examples where agile leadership really made a significant difference in a challenging or complex situation.
I'm going to jump in on that one, and I'm going to, if that's okay, and use
Yeah.
more of my own experience right now and hope that it translates properly. And so I'm a small team. I've got myself plus 3, and one of those 3 is currently on maternity leave. So the 2 that I have with me currently in a full-time capacity, one of the things that we're struggling with as we're growing and scaling is that I have team members that have a lack of confidence in their own abilities, even though they're crushing the work that they do. And then that lack of confidence is then spilling into the mindset of like imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. And all of the things, and like a lot of self-doubt. And while I know that that's very common, we all have those moments of imposter syndrome or lack of confidence, or the room I'm walking into is like, I shouldn't be in the room, or all of the things.
Yes.
But having done a lot of the work internally for myself as I've been going, when I started, it was just going to be me. And then it was like, oh my gosh, now we need to hire. And now we need to hire again. And that has evolved very quickly. And by doing that work, I'm struggling with, I see everything very solutions focused. I never see problems as problems. And so to get my team to catch up to that, and Ange can attest to this, I'm a million miles an hour. Like, I'm go, 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 go. And so to try to be bringing them with me, and then also being like, hey, let's instill the positive mindset and let's share the confidence that you should have, because you're doing great. What it's really done is it's forced me to slow down a little bit so I can say, okay, is this really complicated, or is it complex? And then how do we instill the values of myself and then the individuals on the team to then be able to say, like, we're creating mountains out of molehills here, right? Like, we really need to look at it strategically and just learn and lean into the mindset that if we're solutions focused, and if we can come to our clients with options, right? And if you as a team can be empowered to say, of these options, this is what I would recommend, not what I think Jen would recommend, then we're going to be able to move those things forward. And so it's really pushing us to the limits of, again, everybody's comfort level in terms of how are we going to move that part forward. Because I think we all need to be on that same page in order for us to scale to the growth that I know that we're capable of.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Jen. And like, 3 things could definitely take us down a rabbit hole, and I think they're all golden nuggets here. One being, as a leader, when you grow, the expectation for your team to grow with you is fair. 100%, full stop. Like, cultural alignment, all of that stuff needs to be there. And curiosity with release of judgment for leaders is really important. I think that falls into that definition of agility, because oftentimes, Jen, you and I can sit down and we know the language, we know the lingo, we know each other's businesses through and through. So we can just be like this. What about that? Do you know this person? What about this person? Did you think about that? Whereas with team members, what I'm hearing, which brings me to the second point, is around, it's not just agility, it's helping the team to understand the differentiating factors between resiliency and grit, because that is what helps you get to the problem mindset shift, right? And then the third thing being, when it comes to that agility piece as a leader, it's looking to prioritize as to, okay, what is that thing that I need my team to focus on right now versus 3 months from now versus 6 months. And it seems like a lot of layers for leaders, and it is, which also draws us back to the attention of, it's really important as a leader to be able to refocus and invest in themselves as well as their team members. So thank you for the vulnerability and sharing that example, Jen. I love it.
Absolutely. And I'll just bookend off of that to say, when we talk about like everyone's like a thumbprint, and because it's people, everything is different, how everyone's going to receive that message is going to require a different approach. And so for me, it's like knowing, when am I coming in as like the mother hen and, giving kind of a soft place to land. And then when am I coming in with some tough love parenting in that kind of sense, to be like, okay, like we've hung on to this long enough, let's move it forward. Because when I've said this, and don't beep it out, I'll beep myself out. But like, if we sit on our own beep long enough, you can get really stuck in that. And like, that's not the trajectory that we're on. Right. But then also creating a safe space where they can be vulnerable and say, this is why I don't have the confidence, or this is why I think I'm not doing well. And then, that flows into the approach that we would use with our clients as well.
It really sounds highly collaborative in the sense of, allowing your team members the space to discover and have their own epiphanies, which really kind of backs into that coach approach.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts, examples?
Well, I just wanted to kind of jump in on Jen's excellent example, and I again appreciate telling the personal story. But I think what allowed you to have the ability to share a personal story, I think, is actually the kind of the key to that story, is the ability to be vulnerable. And I think that there's not really any way that we can have agility in our approach to kind of solutions and to kind of progress if we're not willing to, shoot from the hip sometimes and try something out and be vulnerable and put ourselves out there. Because I mean, a lot of the work that we do is we do a lot of work around organizations trying to improve psychological safety. And, so we go in, we have diagnostic tools, we investigate, and we try and find the causes of it lacking, and where is it present, and try and merge everything. But is a lot there to, it's about, the organization has to kind of see the individual, and also kind of allow the person to kind of bring their whole self to the conversation. And they have to be psychologically safe in order to do that. And, to be, and to kind of go in and know, okay, I trust Jen that she's coming in as mother hen. I trust what that's going to be, but I also trust, okay, if she's coming in here to kick my butt, then she knows that's the right thing to do. And I feel safe in that, and also safe to kind of respond to both sides of you. So I really think that there's a lot of elements that we have to do right around psychological safety in order to kind of allow our workplaces to have that agility. But I also think that, it's something that, like, again, we see, like, we're working with a transportation, mid-sized transportation company in the US, and I'll just evolve into my story. And their CFO kind of said that, we want this shift towards a more people-centric organization. Like we want our legacy to be that we are an employer of choice. And so he's kind of championing this cultural transformation in the work that we're doing with some of our other collaborators to make that happen. And it is something that is, hard. It is a lot of work. It requires constant buy-in, but it requires, speaking to different audiences in the way that they want to be spoken to. But it's about, trying to, incorporate a sense of, vulnerability in him trying to put this out there, but also allowing for employees to have that too. So it really is something that, if we want to create more agility, if we want to create a greater sense of kind of like people focus, then we have to let the people be able to be themselves and speak up and share their thoughts and ideas when they need to without retaliation or ridicule. Ensure that that's not just a, while this is a hot button issue, but how that's ingrained in the DNA of the organization.
I'll tell you a funny story, kind of funny-ish, like haha, kind of sarcastic funny. I remember when I was a director of HR, we'll just say for a company, and there was a policy that backed into the issue that C-suite was talking about, and I was at the table. And when I brought up the policy, there was 5 different versions already out within the organization. And part of my job was to clean that up, obviously, right? You need one version of the policy out there.
Yeah.
So all it's to say is I was vulnerable enough to say, you know, version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is here. Da, 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 da. I think it should be this. So I'm providing proactive approaches. And I was ridiculed because I brought up the policies in that meeting with C-suite. They didn't want to focus on that right now. And so I kind of like sat back in that moment. And I was thinking, God, like, am I that far off the mark? Obviously I wasn't, but it kind of gives the flip side of what a non-psychological safe environment can look like, and therefore what it can do. Because from then there on, I would feel hesitant, or I need to ask 2 or 3 questions before I would offer something so that I didn't feel ridiculed or put down, essentially. On the flip side of that, with Intuity Performance from a training and coaching perspective, we've seen over, especially through COVID and a lot of things moving to the online space, where organizations are looking for dynamic approaches. And this is more to our HR leaders and HR peeps in the room. And Di, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, in that there isn't one solution or one resolution that fits all. And so part of that agility is rests within the HR team as well as leadership, in the sense of trying to figure out those solutions and what the organization actually needs versus wants. So coming full circle, I was doing a cohort, a leadership cohort with an organization. They didn't have 1 or 2 or 3, but they actually had 4 layers of management in one cohort and nominees to be managers. So as you can see by Kobe's eyebrows, that's dynamic, and agility is required. So here comes vulnerability in the sense that halfway through our cohorts, I've always done check-ins with the key stakeholders. You know, how's it going? Is it beneficial? Are people utilizing some of the language in the workplace? What is the transfer to knowledge? Where do you see value? Where can we improve? And I was so grateful to work with this team, because they said, you know what, Ange, like, loving your stuff, but our tech people or tech leaders are having a hard time translating the information. So for me, I had to, you know, kind of swallow my ego a bit, because I had to flex agility skill sets or strengths in that situation to really problem solve with them to make sure that they were getting a true ROI as promised. And so what we did was we looked at it from the perspective of, okay, instead of pre-work of reading this management article per se, the pre-work is senior leadership will bring in an anecdotal problem to solve. Middle management will add value to it. New managers can therefore ask questions. And we created the environment so that it really played back into the workplace. So that's just another example as to, one, making sure that when you're in a critical or challenging situation, that you have a safe place, piggybacking off of Kobe, and taking it a step forward, that it's not just leadership that is responsible for agility, but also your HR and surrounding supportive departments. Di, what have you been experiencing over the past few years when it comes to agility from an HR perspective?
Yeah, so a few years ago, our department completely changed, got new leadership, kind of separated from some other parts of the business, and we had to rebuild. We basically had to tear everything down and rebuild. And that was the first time I've ever been part of that. And it's a little terrifying at first to get a new boss, but it was the best thing that ever happened, because we were open to change, right? Instead of being like, how come all of that happened? It's what can we do better going forward? And we shifted the entire department from a competitive vibe to a collaborative vibe, right? We're no longer building policy around punitive measures. We're saying, how do we do better, you know, with teaching managers to teach our people better, right? And so we shifted from, you know, shame to what do they call it? I'm sorry, it was reflection, right? And so it was good for me, because I was in the middle of my own journey of trying to figure out that how do I get through this imposter syndrome? And then I had a boss who came in and believed in me, probably for the first time I've ever had that. And I noticed how big of a difference that made. And HR to me is the center, the heart of a company. And if we are competitive and we're backstabbing, then that will bleed into everything. And we have the
Absolutely.
responsibility to not let that happen. And it was great to have a team that was focused on that and just to see it change and the way it changed everything outside of that department. And now we're collaborating much better with other teams, and people come to our office all the time to talk, right? And so for me, that was a great way to see that shift change, and how that can impact a company culture is really how HR is handling all of that stuff.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop a quote for us to reflect on. And this quote is from Alvin Toffler, who's a futurist. And he had said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." What does that mean to us in the sense of, where we sit in our businesses or our roles when it comes to agility?
You're up, Kobe.
That is totally fair. It is absolutely. And one thing I should probably put out there too, when Andrew responded to my eyebrows, I have what my wife calls thinking jerk face, and I am trying to process something. I may have a scowl on my face, so I want to apologize for that. And feel free to use that if you know anyone else with this horrible condition.
I was trying to relate to you, Kobe. Don't take that away from me. I'm
No,
joking.
it's all good.
I think I'm married to a Kobe.
Then you have my sympathies. What was the question actually?
So we were backing in off of a quote from Alan Toffler, who's a futurist. And basically what he's saying is that no longer are we looking at being literate or illiterate based on reading, writing, etc., but rather those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. I love that quote, by the way.
No, that's wonderful. You're definitely in my wheelhouse because adult education is where my graduate degree is. So it really is about education is the great equalizer. Or sorry, learning is the great equalizer, right?
Okay.
Because it's the idea of if we can't relearn about ourselves, if we can't unlearn bad habits, if we can't relearn about ourselves, we are stuck in a path forward that it's a rail line we're never going to be able to get off from. But if we can take, like, kind of going back to your story, Angie, but kind of taking our ego aside and critically reflecting and can we do this differently? Can we do this better? Am I wrong? Like one of the fundamental things we do when we try and do initial work around kind of changing the organization and trying to do some kind of talent transformation pieces is to start with almost like a direct line of adrenaline of critical thinking into the organization, like challenging the preconceived traditional thoughts. And if we can't do that, then there's very little ability to have long-term success. We could probably create we could probably prop up success in the short term, but it's unsustainable if there's not that ability to say, okay, we were doing, old was good, but new is better. If we can't get to that type of at least, willingness to kind of meet us halfway, then we're never going to be successful forward. So those that can relearn about themselves, those that can grab new information, and those that can pivot and adjust their own mindset, those are the ones that are going to be successful. Because as we say, things are complicated, things are complex when we're talking about people. So we have to be able to make sure that we're prepared. We have the tools in our toolbox to deal with anything that involves people.
Absolutely. And when you're speaking from a leadership side of it, like what's coming through my mind, Kobe, is same, in the sense that when you're looking at coaching leaders and groups of leaders, it's ensuring that agility is a soft skill that they have under their belt, because 9 times out of 10, the process is to shortly look back and what has been done in past and challenge that belief and or thought process and or action to ensure that moving forward, it's in alignment with the actual operational goals, with the culture of your organization, and being able to really fulfill or enact or be that conduit of agility amongst other leadership skill sets from a coach approach perspective. I was thinking about you, Jen, too, when Kobe was speaking, because I'm curious to understand when it comes to learning, unlearning, and relearning, when it comes to like recruitment and company brands, employee branding, what's been coming up for you from an industry perspective? I think that could be an interesting look.
Yeah, it's a loaded question for sure. What I'm
Not
finding
intended.
is no, totally. But what I'm finding is everything in our world is moving at lightning speed, as we know.
Yes,
But everything is so rooted in archaic models, perceptions,
you
beliefs,
got it.
and all the things.
Mhm.
So when we go in and someone's saying, we've tried it on our own, we can't find the right person, the interview process, we're losing candidates or whatever. And then we go and we actually, because what we will do over and above find you the candidate is we will look at your whole process and go, okay, well, your pre-screen's not right, or you've got the wrong people sitting in on the interviews, or whatever that looks like. And what we are finding in today's market is that people are stuck in the way we hired in the 80s and the 90s, maybe a little bit of the 2000s because they're feeling like they're hip and they're cool and they're kind of moving things forward. But the reality of it is that they're not in current day. And then if they try to go current day, it's like, oh, well, we built our entire hiring process off of AI, or, we're doing all 5 types of assessments instead of like one that they should really be focusing on. So because that to me widens the gap between what candidates are looking for jobs the wrong way, right? Like that's the reality too. You've got your grade 10 resume template that doesn't work anymore because grade 10 was for me 1990. So like that, but my son's just finished grade 10 now and had the same pretty close to template that he brought home this year as to what I had 30-ish or more years ago, right?
Interesting.
So from that, because I remember that he came in and he was like, so I go to this thing and they gave me a resume template. I was like, oh, let me see it. And I was like, we're not using that. And he was like, what? And like, we're not using that. And I was like, I'm going to give you this one. He's like, no, we have to. And I was like, maybe you should just give me the teacher's email and I'll come in and I will talk about. And he's like, absolutely not. But to that point is that everything is so archaic and we're trying to add current day stuff in, but like not letting go of the old so that we can create, again, positive candidate experience, because the gap just keeps getting wider from what I can see.
Yes.
People don't see their, like, I use this with clients all the time. Like, you know what Gatorade does, you know what Nike does, you know what Pepsi does. Great. Why should somebody want to work for that organization? Let's tell that story, because your employer brand and your job postings become your marketing tool. And so that now we're not just your recruiter, we're telling you, here's how you market your brand so the right people come and find you. And they want to be stuck in a different kind of widget. And so we're met with a lot of resistance. At the same time, when we have clients that will actually collaborate with us and we're not simply finding them the 5 candidates for them to interview and they let us in the other pieces,
right,
we're changing retention rates. Like we're changing like time to hire. Like we're putting in together whole strategies that they're like, oh, okay, this actually makes sense now, because there's the resistance to let go of the familiar, which we all know change is hard, like that is whatever that is in whatever you're dealing with. At the same time, when we can gently shove them forward and then they become open to that and go, okay, we'll try it your way, then they start to realize that the archaic ways we've been doing things are not going to work in this world. And when you think about the kids from 17 all the way through to young adults in their late 20s and 30s, the way that they're going to look for jobs and stay in jobs and excel in jobs are not the way that we did it. Like it's just not going to work. So we have to stop being so resistant to like making the change and not staying inside of that. And recruitment, I think, is the one area where we are constantly going to see like, well, we've always done it this way, right? And when I was not on my own and I worked for a large global financial services organization, the process was so heavy, all the steps you had to go through to hire great talent, that like Agile would never have been something they would have even comprehended, because of the fact that it was like, we have to check all of these boxes and we have to do all of these things, when sometimes great talent doesn't need 100 checklist, like 100 past checklist. It's like, this is a great person, they're going to fit in our organization, let's move and let's move quickly. If not, they're going to the competitor and then you're going to watch them shine somewhere else.
Right. And when it comes to common barriers to agile leadership, how can we help leaders overcome them?
I would love to see people just be more open, right? Like just open to Kobe, what's your perspective? Di, what's your perspective? How can we take both of those and go, this resonates with me and that resonates with me. Something Ange said, I'm going to try to like move that forward and being open to, we live in a world now where before there were 10 options to do something, now there's 1,000.
Right.
So like, where can we start to find ways that we can be open to say, let's try it this way? Be okay if you stumble, fall, whatever, like wipe out all of the things. But just there's going to be a nugget of something in there that's going to work, whether it's the recruitment process, whether it's how you're going to build people and culture, whether it's how you're going to bring your teams to make sure that they're engaged. And so if we could get leaders to go, this is how we've always done it, and be like, that's great. And maybe we still will, but like, let's just put that on the shelf for a second and let's come over here and let's explore the possibilities. Because then I also think that leans into the, like, we can maybe change some of their mindset, which will make it easier and have them be less resistant.
Absolutely. When it comes to operational approaches, 9.9 times out of 10, it really has to stem back to that level of emotional intelligence that that person has. And Jen, what you're speaking to is, a cornerstone of emotional intelligence, and being able to be self-aware enough to know, okay, what are my blind spots? Where am I rigid? What beliefs can I challenge? And where do I need to go with this, in the sense of being open and empathetic to different processes? Absolutely, 100%.
And I think I would just close that part off to say, I think we lean on the old ways with everything because we feel like it's the safety net. And it's less of a safety net and more of a roadblock because it slows us down. And we all know, because we're all dealing with people, whether you're hiring them, performance managing them, kind of building teams or what have you, is that we lose attention very, very quickly if people aren't bought in. So why would we slow down the ability to get someone to be like, oh, I see this, I'm bought into it? Because if not, you lose them from an organization, and retaining talent is a whole different conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And the other thing that comes up for me too is kind of to play the double-edged sword. I think it depends on the definition of slow down, because in some circumstances, to really help people shift their beliefs or attitudes or buy-in, they need to understand more facts, or they need to understand the risks, or they need to understand why should they even care. So in some circumstances, I do believe that slowing down is good, but I see what you're saying. I think, Jen, your intention is that as an employer, you can't ignore a lot of those earmarkers, because therefore that means that you're stuck or you're slow in that process and will not be able to retain team members because it's such a competitive market out there. What do you think, Di?
Yeah, so there's some great things I'm hearing, and I think at the core of it for me is when people are resistant to that change, it's they don't have that self-trust. And I mean, that's my opinion, right? But I think that's missing. And I think you see that a lot in a competitive environment, because if I mess up, my team loses, I lose, I look stupid, right? And when you shift to a collaborative culture, it's, hey, okay, yeah, we effed up, right? Let's just start over. And we're going to shift that perspective a little bit. And I think we're going to see like Jen was talking earlier, like we're just stuck in that archaic mindset, but that's going to be shifting. We've got generations moving out, generations moving in, and there's a lot of resistance to what the youth wants to bring into a company. And I think there's a landmine. I mean, it's just a gold mine. I mean, it's just so much there that we can learn.
It's both.
Landmine too.
Surprisingly accurate, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's a lot of it too. And so for people who are resistant to that change to move to collaboration, is how do we go in and help them learn that, hey, this is about taking a chance and we're together, but what it requires is more accountability. And I think that's where that resistance is. A lot of people are afraid of that accountability. So I'm going to keep my stuff to me, and we're going to keep doing this because I'm good at this and I can't do anything different. So I think as leaders, that's the point we have to kind of go into.
And I think backing into what Jen was saying, playing both sides of this, is that the accountability piece is the underlying cause in some circumstances, or I would say, I would bet most, of a slower pace, right? You're hanging on to older things because of fear of vulnerability or accountability. Or maybe that's not something the company culture currently leans into, but ought to. So I really like all the points in the sense of common barriers of agile leadership, because what I'm hearing are things like ego, vulnerability, change resistance, the pace of change and keeping up with the same, as well as being not just accountable for ourselves, but mentoring accountability throughout the organization, having that clear, open, communicative connection to ensure that you're stepping into the agility leadership style versus stepping back from it. Yeah, I love it.
100%.
I'm all about the how-to. If you could provide one tip, and I'm kind of going off script now, just so everybody knows and they're not searching their notes. I'm teasing you all. If you could provide one how-to when it comes to agile leadership, what would be like a first step, or what would be a predominant thing that comes to your mind in learning this skill set as a leader or HR professional?
Can you just say it one more time, because you glitched out on me?
Yeah, for sure. I hope it was the earbuds.
I think it was.
No, the question was really around if you could provide one piece of advice around leadership and agility, how to, essentially. So properly rephrasing this question, we'll omit that part because it sounded shitty. Essentially what I'm saying is that if you could give one piece of advice for leaders to lean into the agile leadership style, what would you say to them?
I would just say, like, just be open to the possibility. And it's very hard to do because we are set in our ways, and it's whether the way we've done our job for a number of years, or it's, going through even the way we were raised and the things that we believe. But I think it applies really to anything in the crazy world that we live in today. But like specifically with this, like, just be open to the learning and the unlearning and then learning again, because there's always gold inside of it. There's probably some landmines too, but there's always gold inside of that. And if I went into, I would like to think that I know a lot about recruitment, but if I thought I knew everything about recruitment and I wasn't open to the perspective, maybe someone junior on my team who sees it a different way based on their perception, I wasn't open to like learning the things I needed to learn as a leader in business, because I had never been a leader prior to hiring my first team. Remember, like, I never had my own team. If I was so rigid in that way and wasn't willing to like learn and unlearn again and fall on my face and then get back up and keep going, I wouldn't have a business that I have now compared to what it started. So I would just say, just be open to the perspective and be open to the possibilities. And I think that if once you can do that, whether it's in your work or it's in personal, like, they will then start to feed into each other, and then maybe the world will just be a nicer place.
I love that, Jen. Thank you for sharing. Kobe or Di, you want to try to lean into that?
Yeah,
your
well, actually, I'm
perspectives?
thinking that's a tough thing to follow.
Yeah.
So I think it would be about have the confidence to be willing to change. And I mean, like, there's really think about it, kind of going back to what Jen said, like, like the listening side of it too, right? Because like listening really is the willingness to change. If you are not willing to change, you hear what I say, but you're not listening. You're just waiting for your turn to talk or waiting for me to finish speaking, right? So it really is about that, because like, actually, if I can actually going back to something that Ange said about, you talked about kind of the soft skills of agility. One of the things that I think is maybe a better way to even kind of talk even about kind of these essential qualities that are considered soft skills, they're really more employability skills. Because to be employable as a leader in the ever-changing world that we live in, you need to have these things. These are not soft, nice to haves. These are essential employability pieces. You are not employable in your job if you do not have the ability to pivot, the ability to challenge your own assumptions, the ability to collaborate. If these things don't exist, then you are not you're not employable in your own position. And it's something that I think that we need to be confident in the fact that, we can do this. We don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. We don't have to always, like be defensive. Now, again, going back to Diana's point, if you're in this highly competitive environment, any like smell of weakness is your downfall. That's a tough environment to be in. And it's really hard to be confident in that environment, because you're always kind of on the attack. But so this is kind of why, one of the things that we talk about a lot with when we collaborate with our companies, we talk about, you need to kind of work on the people and you need to work on the environment, because you want to make sure that they're both in line, because you can't you can't grow top, products in bad soil. So it really is about just realizing that, you kind of have to have it all, but it really starts with the confidence in the leader to be willing to change. And that's something that if they're not willing to do that, if they're not, because if they're not confident in themselves, in their just ability just to kind of put it out there and see what happens, then it's going to be very difficult for anything else to happen. And we all know what happens with unconfident leadership.
Absolutely. And I would just say to that point too, is while we want to get them to a place where they're, confident and capable of being open to change, maybe it's just the baby step first, or the micro step to say, like, just be open to the conversation. And then once they start to have the realization of, like, oh, okay, this number one isn't so bad, two, I can do this, or what have you, then they're more likely to embrace the change. Because again, everybody's just wired to not make any changes inside of that. So just saying, like, just like baby step it if you need to. And then, but if you're completely resistant, then yeah, like it's not going to work for you.
Well, that's just it. And it's also not fair for me to say, just be confident, just go do that. Yeah, exactly. But confidence is built on frameworks. It's built on small steps. It's built on because a lack of confidence is fear of unknown situations. But but if you have a plan for how to handle the unknown, you can build confidence in that framework, in that plan, in that support, which is why coaching is such an essential thing for high-level leaders.
Thank you, Kobe. Yes.
If you don't have any kind of net support system to back you up, then of course you're not going to be confident. You're talking into an echo chamber or to yes people or whatever, right? So you have to be able to have someone that you're accountable to, mostly even for yourself, just kind of someone that bounce ideas off of. But it's really hard to build confidence in a vacuum.
And to add to that point of building confidence, Kobe, I think what I've seen in coaching many leaders over the past decade, I would say at this point, is that when they can see themselves that they've made the correct suggestion, or I shouldn't say correct, they've made the right fit suggestion or choice, or they've done that thing that there was some fear around and there was a positive result. It's being able to see that validation. And to your point, Kobe, being accountable for your own performance or employability skills is really important. Agreed. And having leaders or having an organization that really values gratitude versus just simply compliments. Again, it's not a checklist. It's really about ensuring that that person is validated and they can grow and that they're supported, kind of backing into what you're saying. Absolutely. I want to hear your thoughts on this one.
So I think I would narrow it down all the way to asking them to start letting people win. Like, start letting people win. It's not hard. I mean, if you have a really big ego, it is, right? But that's how you start to chisel it down. And you just challenge your leaders and your peers, and you say, hey, they did this. Let's just, hey, rah, rah, and start building that in small increments. It's a small thing. Hey, this person did that. Hey, and also when they succeed, everybody does that for them. And then you just start kind of that synergy of everybody's cheering everybody on, because it is the small steps, right? And then it's also that buy-in of letting them challenge it. Tell me why you don't like it. That's okay. Like, tell me, and your experience has something that somebody else doesn't know. So how could you do it different? And then you start to pull them in a little bit, whether it's a leader or a peer. And I think that shifts that a little bit, and it brings that introspection. And so why don't you want people to win? What about that was hard for you? And that's a little bit of coaching, right? And maybe not everybody's got that ability to do that at their job, and I think that's just kind of how you shift that a little bit and give them an opportunity.
Absolutely. I want to take it out to like 30,000, 60,000 feet here, because there's been so much valuable kind of insights around how to support leadership and pointing to pieces of advice that essentially, when you're thinking about the value of ensuring that your team members have employability skills, really what that comes down to is that because of the change, because of the rapid pace and change of the market, it's now a competitive advantage. So in the next year, not decades, not the next 5 years, in the next year, we're going to see a lot of things change with regards to LLMs and AIs. We're seeing it now. It's changing monthly. What you can't currently build yet are those employability skills, which are now becoming a competitive advantage for your team members, especially in the leadership realm. And the ROI to that is having not just yourself as a CEO or a venture capitalist or a C-suite stakeholder, essentially being able to envision futures, but you're going to have diverse opinions around envisioning futuristic things, products, more efficient processes, market or technology type stuff, and showcasing proactive adaptation. So I just wanted to point that out in the sense that it may seem like something super small in a nutshell, but it has a huge ripple effect, not just across the team, but for the innovation and sustainability of organizations as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Awesome. Well, I know that we could chat for hours on end here, everyone. I really appreciate your time and influence in this topic of adaptability in the changing market. Jen, Kobe, Di, let us know how we can reach out to each of you.
Oh, okay. My best way is either my website, which is www.thewarringtongroup.ca, or LinkedIn, because I have a heavy presence over that way, and it's just Jen Warrington.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me, you can check out our website, roman3.ca. So roman3.ca. We also, my partner and I, we have our own podcast called Diagnosing the Workplace, not just an HR podcast. And we talk about random things involving business and workplace culture and sort of stuff. So you can always contact us through that as well.
Thank you, Kobe. Di.
Yeah, so my last name is actually wrong on here. I just realized that. So, but you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the only place you guys would want to look for me. I don't think anybody wants to email me at work unless you have something fascinating you want to talk about, but I'm happy to do that too. So, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you everyone for your care and time today. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuity Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.